Hi, today is December 31st, the last day of 2022. Seems like a good time to go to Abilene for New Year's Eve. Well, or at least to visit the Abilene Paradox. Harvey, a management consultant, came up with the idea for the Abilene Paradox based on something that really happened to him. He and his wife were over visiting the in-laws, that is to say his wife's parents, in Coleman, Texas. Something they did pretty frequently on a Sunday afternoon. Well, they were sitting around on a hot summer's day playing dominoes on the porch in Coleman, Texas. By the way, a really nice town, I've been there. And decided, they decided to go to Abilene for dinner. But you have to understand how that happened, because actually nobody wanted to go to Abilene. Now, how would that occur? Well, it happens all the time. If you've been in any kind of organization, you realize that frequently people do things and then afterwards it's kind of disappointing and people say, well, I didn't really want to do it. I didn't think it was such a good idea. Or sometimes they even leave a meeting where people decided by consensus to do something with each person saying, I have real doubts. I don't think this is a great idea. But they all went along because others they thought to do it. In fact, nobody wanted to do it. It was based on a misconception of other people's preferences. So here's how the original story goes. They're sitting around playing dominoes, hot summer afternoon, and the father-in-law starts worrying that people are bored. And so he says, what do you think about the idea of going to Abilene for dinner? Well, one by one, they said, well, I guess, yeah, sure. And each person goes around thinking that the others want to go to Abilene for dinner. Now, they do. Turns out the pickup truck, air conditioning isn't working and it hasn't been fixed yet. So they drive all the way to Abilene. Now, it's about 50 miles, or actually 84 kilometers on US 84, interestingly. And they get to Abilene, they go to a cafeteria. The food is really not very good. It's a long, hot, dusty drive. Then on the way back, it's another long, hot, dusty drive. So it's hours before they get back to Coleman. And they're sitting around and one says, well, that was nice, wasn't it? At which point, the daughter says, the wife, that is to say, says, no, it wasn't that great. I wish we had just stayed here. I didn't really want to go to Abilene in the first place. And others say, well, I didn't really want to go to Abilene either. Father-in-law, who brought up the idea, said, well, I just was worried that people were bored. I just brought it up, as an idea. I didn't really want to go to Abilene. Turns out nobody really wanted to go to Abilene. And yet each person said, yes, let's go to Abilene. So this isn't the kind of situation we've been talking about with the discursive dilemma or Condorcet's paradox or other kinds of things where it feels as if, yes, there's a complicated logical relationship going on or some other kind of relationship that puts us in cyclic preferences. In this case, the preferences of the group were all identical. Every member said, I'd rather sit here on the porch than go to Abilene. But they unanimously decide to go to Abilene. Now, as I mentioned earlier, you might think, well, that's a quirky story. Those people should have talked and admitted what they really wanted. But I have noticed it's a very common thing. And indeed, Harvey's point was that in organizations or families or groups of any kind, it's really common. Now, I think there are a number of different ways of thinking about what this paradox really means. From one point of view, it's that people desire acceptance from other people. And indeed, I think it is a serious problem in groups where people score very high on agreeability. I had a master's student a few years ago who wrote a thesis about this. She studied boards of directors of nonprofit organizations, and she gave people personality surveys. What she found is, they were pretty normal people in most respects, but they were extraordinarily high on the agreeability dimension. In fact, the average among the population she sampled of these directors of nonprofits was 95th percentile. Now that's amazing. In the population at large, it's 50th percentile. That would be the average. And so these people really want to please others. They really want to be agreeable, which means they want to go along with what they think the majority of the group wants. Now, it's a serious problem for nonprofits, and to be honest with you, I think it extends across a lot of organizations or families or other things, groups that have to make decisions. The more agreeable people are, the more they're going to go along with what they think the group preference is. Now, you might think, well, wait a minute, if everybody is doing this, why don't people have a better conception of what the group preferences and the individual preferences really are? So some people will say, look, it's not so much agreeability or a desire for acceptance or something like that. Instead, what really explains it is miscommunication. The dad in the story, for example, says, well, what if we went to Abilene? He's not saying he wants to go, he's bringing it up for consideration. But that can easily be misinterpreted as advocating the idea. And so there really is a problem that can emerge in organizations where people misinterpret things. They think, oh, you must want to do that. But it doesn't necessarily mean that. People are saying there's another possibility we should think about. It doesn't mean they favor that possibility. And so you might think this is a problem about miscommunication. You might also think that it's really about people not just expressing what they want and what their own preferences are. If people had said, yeah, it's kind of hot and we've been playing dominoes for a while, but I don't want to drive to Abilene, especially in a truck that's not air-conditioned. If each person had just spoken out and said that, well, the point then might be not so much misunderstanding or a desire to go along and be liked by the group, but just a matter of, come on, be honest. Say what you think. And that's related, I think, to both of the other two factors. But you might think the real problem isn't about people mishearing, it's about people misspeaking and not making themselves clear. I think there's another factor here, and it has to do with altruism, with the fact that people are raised to be nice people and think that morality requires them to be nice. That is to say, to think not, what do I want, but what do other people want? And so actually, although I think niceness is an immensely important thing, and one of the lessons of game theory is that nice strategies succeed far better than those that start off in a hostile frame of mind, nevertheless, you can be too nice. You can be too concerned with the welfare of others and the preferences of others and not concerned enough about your own. So one of the things you could infer about this family, thinking about whether or not to go to Abilene, is just, well, you're really nice people, and you're too nice. You're thinking, what do I think other people want to do? Instead of just saying, well, I want to do this. And so you might think it's really a problem about being nice or being altruistic or putting other people's preferences ahead of your own, or at least what you think those other people's preferences are, because that's why people weren't saying what they wanted. Everybody thought, well, I want to be a nice person. I don't want to say, I don't want to go to Abilene. I'd rather just stay here. Instead, each thinks, I think the others want to go. And so I will put other people's preferences ahead of my own. This example, I think, illustrates something interesting in game theory and in life, which is that altruism in that sense, trying to do what actually helps other people, is different from the golden rule. I think too often we assimilate the golden rule, treat others as you'd like to be treated, and act as if that is a kind of altruism, put others first. But this example brings out the difference between those, because somebody who is acting according to the golden rule would think, I should treat others the way I'd want them to treat me. I don't want to go to Abilene, so I should actually assume they don't want to go to Abilene either. That is to say, I should treat them the way I'd want to be treated, which is, I'd want people to be honest about preferences, for one thing, and for another, I don't want to go. And so I would really prefer that they not want to go. On the other hand, if I'm thinking, I don't want to go, but, I really shouldn't be selfish. I should put their preferences ahead of my own. Then I'm going to think not, what would I want them to do for me? But instead, what do I think I ought to be doing for them? And that's a dangerous thing to do because, for one thing, you may not understand what their preferences are, But for another, if everybody's acting according to that sort of altruistic principle, there's a funny sense in which nobody's preferences end up being satisfied because everybody's trying to put what they think the other's preferences are first. And so it's like this weird thing where I'm trying to help you, you're trying to help me, and somehow it's ungrounded from any actual reality. So partly I think the point here is to be more open, more honest about your own preferences, to listen more carefully to exactly what other people have said, and not, by the way, to try to be so agreeable that you submerge your own preferences and risk the group decision, but also that you think in terms of how you would want others to treat you, not in terms of what you think they would like from you. Because that kind of other-directedness, or altruism, or whatever you want to call it, can go too far. And if everybody's in that position, it can turn out that everybody's trying to serve everybody else, and nobody's actually getting what they want. So, on second thought, let's don't spend New Year's Eve in Abilene. Let's stay right here.